He'd been gone for 83 days when I found Dad's name, clear as day, on Mark's business card. Not Mark's company deals with my dad's stuff or their associates. No. It was printed right there, beneath the sleek corporate logo of Viridian Solutions, LLC, just below Mark's own name, as Senior Consultant, Thomas Tom Miller. Thomas Miller, my dad. My chest went tight like someone had cinched a drawstring around my ribs and pulled. This wasn't some old card from before he disappeared. This was Mark's card, tucked into the side pocket of his worn olive green messenger bag, the one he always left on the kitchen counter when he came over. It smelled of old coffee and that sickly sweet cologne he favored, the kind that reminded me of cheap air freshener in a motel room. 83 days. That's 2 months and 22 days of staring at Dad's empty chair at the dinner table. 2 months of Mom looking more and more gaunt. Then suddenly, less so. 2 months of police officers, Detective Hayes and Officer Rodriguez, asking the same questions over and over, their voices flat, their notebooks full of nothing. The official report, filed on March 10th, case number 0764 Alpha 9, noted, missing adult male, no signs of foul play, no obvious leads. They'd circled back 3 times. Last time was April 29th, just to tell us they had no new information. Dad's phone had gone dead somewhere near the old Quarry Road, about 5 miles north of town, at exactly 4:03 a.m. on that Tuesday morning. They checked his bank accounts, nothing. Credit cards, nothing. His passport, still in the desk drawer, he just vanished. Mom started dating Mark 2 weeks after Dad disappeared. 2 weeks. I remember hearing them laugh from the living room, a light, airy sound that felt like a betrayal. I was in my room, trying to force myself to study for my geometry final. The textbook opened to page 172, showing the Pythagorean theorem. I couldn't focus. I kept seeing Dad's face, hearing his laugh. He would always make pancakes on Saturdays, shaping them into silly animals for me, even though I was 16. Mark, on the other hand, brought over takeout sushi, always the same California rolls and spicy tuna, never asking what I liked. He was a manager at the town's largest insurance firm, Reliance Shore, a big, booming man with a too loud laugh and a habit of referring to me as the kid. He was a pillar of the community, or so everyone said, active in the Rotary Club, even coached the high school junior varsity basketball team for a season. Everyone liked Mark, except me. He was over at our house practically every evening now. He had his own key within a month, a shiny silver one on a keyring with a miniature basketball charm. Mom swore he was just being supportive, that she needed someone, but it felt like he was erasing Dad, one cheap bottle of wine and one California roll at a time. My room, number 203 on the 2nd floor, became my fortress. I'd sit there, scrolling through Dad's old photos on my phone, remembering his goofy grin in front of the Grand Canyon on our trip 2 summers ago, the one where he insisted on wearing that bright yellow hat. The contrast between his vibrant memory and Mark's intrusive presence was stark. That day, the 83rd day, a Saturday, Mark had left his messenger bag on the kitchen counter next to the half-eaten box of donuts Mom had bought for breakfast. She was in the shower, the sound of the water drumming against the tiles upstairs. Mark had stepped out for an important client call, he'd said, his voice hushed as he went into the backyard. I was just grabbing a glass of water, my hand reaching for the pitcher in the fridge when I saw the bag. It was slightly ajar. A small white corner of a card was peeking out from the side pocket, almost as if begging to be noticed. My curiosity, sharp and insistent, was a knot in my stomach. I told myself I was just going to push it back in, to be neat, but my fingers, trembling slightly, pulled it out instead. That's when I saw it. The elegant dark blue lettering on the crisp white stock. Viridian Solutions, LLC, Mark's name, and then, under his, Dad's name, Thomas Tom Miller, Senior Consultant. The card felt cold in my hand, a small, innocent-looking piece of paper holding a universe of wrongness. Viridian Solutions. I'd never heard Dad mention it, not once. He worked as an independent financial advisor, mostly with small businesses and individuals, out of his home office. His business cards, which I still kept a stack of in a shoebox under my bed, were simple. Thomas Miller, Financial Strategies, with his phone number and email. No LLC, no corporate logos, definitely no Mark. My brain started firing, 1,000 questions all at once. What was this? A side gig? A partnership he hadn't told us about? And why was it on Mark's card? Why had Mark, Mom's boyfriend who appeared from nowhere, held onto something so specific to Dad? Something I had never even known existed? I slipped the card into my jeans pocket, the smooth paper pressing against my thigh. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo. I needed to know what Viridian Solutions LLC was. I crept back to my room, trying to make as little noise as possible. The floorboards creaked under my bare feet, each sound amplified in my heightened state. I closed the door softly, locking it out of habit, or perhaps out of an instinct to protect what I'd just found. I pulled out my laptop, a 2-year-old Dell Inspiron, and typed Viridian Solutions LLC into the search bar. The results were immediate. A sleek professional website popped up, dark blues and silvers, talking about bespoke financial restructuring and high net worth asset management. It sounded legitimate, almost intimidatingly so, but there was no mention of Dad anywhere. I clicked through the About Us section, the Our Team page. Mark's photo was there, smiling broadly, listed as Managing Director, but no Thomas Miller. Not a single trace. My hands, still slightly clammy, tightened around the laptop's edge. This was wrong. Terribly wrong. If Dad was a senior consultant, shouldn't his name be on the website? Or had Mark just used Dad's name on a dummy card for some reason? But why? And why keep it? It didn't make sense. The clock on my desk, a small digital one, blinked 10:47 a.m. Mom would be out of the shower soon. Mark would be back from his call. I needed to put the card back. I slid the card back into Mark's messenger bag, making sure it was exactly where I found it. My fingers brushed against something else inside the pocket, something metallic and cool. I resisted the urge to explore further. Not now. I had the name of the company, and I had Dad's name linked to Mark. That was enough for now. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Had Dad and Mark worked together before Dad disappeared? Was Mark somehow involved in his disappearance? The questions looped in my head, a terrifying carousel. I felt a chill run down my spine, despite the warm spring air drifting in through my open window. This wasn't just about Mom moving on too fast anymore. This was about Dad, and something far more sinister. The casual way Mark left the bag, the specific detail on the card, it all pointed to something hidden, something I was only just beginning to uncover. I knew, with an unsettling certainty, that my life had just irrevocably changed. The next few days were a blur of forced normalcy. I went to school, sat through classes on European history and trigonometry, but my mind was miles away, replaying the image of that business card. Every time Mark came over, his laughter grated on my nerves. His easy familiarity with our home, the way he'd prop his feet on the coffee table, Dad never did that, filled me with a quiet fury. I watched him like a hawk, trying to decipher his every move, every word. He always wore that same silver watch, a bulky thing with a dark face, and he'd check it obsessively, almost every 15 minutes, tapping the glass with his index finger. It felt like he was timing something, constantly. I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew I was watching. One evening, as I was walking past the living room, heading to the kitchen for a snack, I heard him telling Mom a story about a client, Mr. Henderson, whose family trust needed restructuring. He paused, looked up, and met my gaze with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "The kid's got a good ear, doesn't she?" he said to Mom, his voice a little too jovial. Mom just laughed. "Oh, she's just hungry." But I felt the unspoken warning in his eyes, a flicker of something sharp and assessing. It sent a shiver down my spine. My first step was to discreetly investigate Viridian Solutions. I went to the public library after school, claiming I needed to research for a history project. I logged onto one of the public computers, careful to use an incognito browser. I didn't want a browsing history connecting me to this search. I typed in Viridian Solutions LLC again. This time, I dug deeper. I found their corporate registration documents on the state's Secretary of State website, file number 83009-710. Mark's name, Mark Anthony Davies, was listed as the sole registered agent and managing member. No other names were mentioned in the official paperwork. No Thomas Miller. That solidified my suspicion. The card was a fake, or at least the information on it was, but why? I started checking old news articles. Viridian Solutions was relatively new, established just over 2 years ago. Most of the articles were generic business press releases. Viridian Solutions expands portfolio. Managing Director Mark Davies attends Economic Summit. Nothing scandalous, nothing out of the ordinary. But I did find one small article, buried deep in the local business section archives, from about 18 months ago. It mentioned a charity gala where Mark Davies was pictured with several prominent local businessmen, including a photograph where I swear I could see the back of Dad's head, standing in the background, near a large potted palm. It was fuzzy, just a profile, but the way his hair curled, the slight tilt of his head, it was unmistakably him. The caption didn't mention him, only Mark and the other more prominent figures. This was the first concrete link I found between them, preceding Dad's disappearance, pushing the timeline of their connection back further than Mom's 2-week rebound. I saved a screenshot of that article, naming it Dad Gala 18 months ago PNG, and saved it to a hidden folder on my laptop, password protected. I noted the date, November 12th. That means they knew each other for at least a year and a half before Dad vanished. Why had Dad never mentioned Viridian or Mark? My dad was an open book, almost to a fault. He told me about his clients, his successes, his frustrations. He certainly would have mentioned partnering with a new company, especially one run by someone who would later become Mom's boyfriend. It just didn't add up. The school library closed at 5:30 p.m. I walked home, the setting sun casting long shadows, my backpack feeling heavy with the weight of my new discovery. I passed the corner store where the fluorescent lights hummed and saw Mr. Peterson, our elderly neighbor, buying his evening newspaper. He waved and I offered a weak smile in return. Everything looked normal, but it felt like the world had shifted on its axis. I tried to think logically. What kind of relationship would Dad have with Viridian Solutions if it wasn't a public, registered one? A secret project? Something off the books? The term financial restructuring on their website suddenly sounded a lot more ominous. When I got home, Mark's car, a dark gray Audi A6, was already in the driveway. Its license plate, Very27, a custom one, always stood out. He was practically living here. I tried to act normal, walking into the kitchen to find Mom and Mark sharing a bottle of Pinot Noir, laughing softly. "How was school, kiddo?" Mark asked, his eyes still holding that unsettling glint from the other day. "Fine," I mumbled, grabbing an apple and retreating to my room. I could feel his gaze on my back until I closed my door. I pulled out Dad's old external hard drive from under my bed. It was a silver Western Digital, a 500 gigabyte model he'd bought 3 years ago. He used it to back up all his client files and personal documents. I plugged it into my laptop. The folder structure was familiar. Clients, taxes, personal, photos. I clicked into personal. There were subfolders for trips, recipes, house docs. Nothing that screamed secret business. I started searching. I typed Viridian into the search bar. Nothing. I tried Davies. Still nothing. I tried Mark. A few unrelated emails about a local charity event from 5 years ago, where a Mark Davies was mentioned as a donor, but it didn't seem to be the same Mark. Then I tried searching for Viridian Solutions LLC within all documents, not just file names. It took a while. The hard drive hummed softly, whirring as it scanned through thousands of files. Finally, one result popped up. A single PDF file buried deep in a subfolder named Projects Old Archived, which was itself within Clients May See. The file was named Project Chimera, Initial Draft PDF. The file size was substantial, 8.7 megabytes. The timestamp on the file modification date was 2 years and 3 months ago, January 27th. This was around the time Viridian Solutions was registered. This had to be it. I opened it, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The document was dense, full of legal jargon and financial models. Pages and pages of flowcharts, projected returns, risk assessments. It outlined a complex investment scheme involving offshore accounts and shell corporations designed to optimize asset liquidity for high net worth individuals. My eyes scanned the text, trying to make sense of it. And then I saw it on page 3 under Key Stakeholders and Primary Consultants. Thomas Miller, Financial Architect, and Mark Davies, Project Coordinator. My breath caught in my throat. Financial Architect. That sounded like a very active, very deep involvement. This wasn't just a casual association. This was a full-blown partnership. And it was all about moving money around in a way that felt shady. The word optimize felt like a euphemism for hide. A shiver ran down my spine. This Project Chimera felt like something my dad, with his unwavering ethical compass, would never touch. He always preached transparency and integrity, yet his name was right there, and Mark's name too. This document linked them both to a scheme that looked deeply questionable, months before Dad vanished. Was this why he disappeared? Had he gotten involved in something he couldn't get out of? The questions were overwhelming. I closed the file, my mind reeling. I quickly deleted the search history on the hard drive, making sure there were no digital breadcrumbs linking me to this discovery. I copied the PDF to my hidden folder, alongside the screenshot, and then ejected the hard drive, tucking it back into its hiding spot. The room felt colder, the air thicker. I was onto something big and dangerous, and it involved Mark, my new, unsettling, supportive stepfather. The file sat like a lead weight in my hidden folder, its implications growing heavier with each passing day. Project Chimera. The name itself sounded ominous, like something out of a spy novel, not a legitimate financial venture. I reread the document several times, trying to pick apart the legalistic language. One specific clause on page 8, section B, subsection 4, outlined a provision for discreet cessation of client involvement, with severe penalties for breach of confidentiality. It didn't mention specific amounts, just damages commensurate with potential exposure. It sounded like a threat. Was this why Dad disappeared? Had he tried to cease involvement and face these penalties? My focus at school completely dissolved. I barely registered the teacher's lecture on quadratic equations. All I could think about was Mark, sitting in our living room, laughing with Mom, his presence an almost physical weight on my shoulders. I started noticing things about him, small details I'd dismissed before. The way he always kept his phone face down on the table, even when he wasn't using it. The way he'd sometimes pause mid-sentence, listening, as if expecting something, his head tilted slightly. His car, the gray Audi A6 with the Very27 license plate, always parked facing the street, ready for a quick exit. I decided I needed more information. Who else knew about Project Chimera? Dad had an old friend, Mr. Peterson, who lived 3 houses down. He was a retired accountant, a quiet man who used to play chess with Dad every Sunday afternoon. Dad trusted him implicitly. I decided to approach him carefully. After school, instead of heading straight home, I walked down to Mr. Peterson's house. His garden was meticulously kept, rows of vibrant tulips and daffodils blooming in neat lines. I knocked on his front door, a heavy oak door with a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Mr. Peterson, a man in his late 70s with a kindly face and spectacles perched on his nose, answered. Ah, Clara, my dear. What a pleasant surprise. Come in, come in. His voice was gentle, a stark contrast to Mark's booming tones. I stepped into his cozy living room, which smelled of old books and chamomile tea. Mr. Peterson, I was wondering if you might have a moment. It's about Dad. He nodded, his expression softening. Of course, dear. Please sit. I carefully phrased my questions. Dad used to talk about his work a lot. Did he ever mention any projects with other companies? Like outside his usual independent work? I watched his face closely. He thought for a moment, stroking his chin. Thomas was always very careful about his clients. Very ethical. He did mention once about a large-scale consultation project he was considering. Something about asset optimization for a group of investors. Said it was a bit out of his usual wheelhouse, but potentially very lucrative. He was hesitant, though. Said the structure was complex. And that some of the other consultants involved weren't quite to his liking. My heart leaped. Did he mention any names, Mr. Peterson? Or a company name? I tried to keep my voice even, calm. He sighed, a wistful sound. He didn't give me names, Clara. Thomas was very discreet about client details, but he did say that one of the main people involved was a bit of a shark, always pushing for faster, less conventional methods. Thomas preferred the slow, steady approach, you know. He said he was going to decline the full involvement, maybe just offer some initial advice, but not sign on for the long haul. He didn't like the look of it, said it smelled of trouble. My hopes deflated a little. He hadn't given a name, but shark and less conventional methods certainly fit Mark. Did he say anything else about why he was hesitant? I pressed. Mr. Peterson nodded. He mentioned the initial meetings were held at a rather plush but very private executive suite downtown. Not a regular office, and that the contract terms were unusually restrictive, almost punitive if one wanted to back out. Punitive, just like the discreet cessation clause in Project Chimera. This was it. This was the missing piece connecting Dad's unease to the shady project. I thanked Mr. Peterson, promising to visit again soon. As I left, the familiar gray Audi A6 drove past, turning into our driveway. Mark. I ducked behind a large rhododendron bush until he was inside, not wanting him to see me talking to Mr. Peterson. The encounter confirmed my suspicions. Dad knew Mark, worked with him, and grew to dislike the project and its methods. But what happened after he decided to back out? That was the crucial question. Back in my room, I pulled out Dad's old flip phone. He always kept it for emergencies, a basic Nokia, almost a relic. It was dead. I found his old charger and plugged it in. After a few minutes, the screen flickered to life. The last outgoing call was to an unknown number on the day he disappeared at 3:47 a.m., just 15 minutes before his main phone died. I didn't recognize the number. It wasn't any of our family or friends. I wrote it down on a piece of scratch paper, tucking it into my pocket. That evening, Mark was particularly jovial, buying Mom an expensive bottle of champagne to celebrate some business success. He kept making comments about taking risks and bold moves. Every word felt like a barb aimed directly at my growing suspicions. Mom, bubbly and relaxed, didn't notice. But I did. Sometimes the biggest rewards come from the biggest gambles, he said, clinking glasses with Mom, his eyes flashing towards me for a split second. A direct challenge. I just stared at my plate, pushing around the pasta Mom had made. My appetite was gone. Later that night, I took a risk. While Mom and Mark were watching a movie in the living room, their voices muted by the television, I crept out. I went to Mark's messenger bag, which he'd left on the kitchen table again. This time, I wasn't just looking for cards. I needed to see what else was in there. My hands trembled as I carefully unzipped the main compartment. Inside, neatly stacked, were various folders, a tablet, and a thick leather-bound notebook. I carefully, quickly pulled out the notebook. It was a moleskin, dark brown with an elastic band. I opened it. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, names, dates, and what looked like financial figures. My eyes scanned frantically. I saw Project Chimera again, written in a bold, assertive hand, and then a list of names. Not client names, but names with small cryptic symbols next to them. A circled T next to Miller Thomas, a small X next to a few other names, and next to my dad's name, just under the T, there was a date, March 10th, the day he vanished, and a single chilling word, resolved. Resolved. That word echoed in my mind, cold and final. It felt like a death sentence. Mark's confident, looping handwriting. This was not just a side project. This was something deep, something dark, and Mark was at the center of it. I quickly snapped a photo of the page with Dad's name and the word resolved using my phone, making sure the flash was off. The quality wasn't great in the dim kitchen light, but it was legible. I heard a sudden laugh from the living room, startling me. I shoved the notebook back into the bag, zipped it up, and retreated to my room. my heart hammering like a trapped bird. The photo, a blurry image on my phone, was concrete proof that Mark knew something about Dad's disappearance. And resolved could only mean one thing. The stakes had just escalated beyond a family dispute. This was now about justice, and it was terrifying. The word resolved burned in my mind, a chilling brand. It felt like I was holding a secret that could break everything. The blurry photo on my phone, depicting Dad's name next to that damning word and the date of his disappearance, was evidence, but it wasn't enough. It was too flimsy, too easily dismissed as contextless. I needed to know more about Project Chimera, more about what resolved truly meant in Mark's twisted ledger. My stomach churned with a constant knot of anxiety. Every time Mark smiled, every time he casually placed his hand on Mom's back, I felt a wave of nausea. He was a predator, living under our roof, and Mom was oblivious. My next step was to find out about that unknown number from Dad's old flip phone. I knew I couldn't just call it. That would be too direct, too risky. I logged on to a pay-as-you-go burner phone lookup service online, one of those slightly dodgy ones I'd found in an obscure forum. I paid for a single lookup with a prepaid gift card I'd received for my birthday, wanting absolutely no trace of my real identity. The service took about 15 minutes. The number was registered to a burner phone, activated just 3 months ago, but the service provided an approximate location for its last known activity, a small industrial park warehouse on the outskirts of town, about 10 miles from our house. Warehouse number 7A. My blood ran cold. The quarry road, where Dad's main phone signal died, was only a few miles from there. Was Dad meeting someone at that warehouse? Was that his final destination? The idea of a desolate industrial warehouse as his last known point sent a wave of fear through me. This wasn't a casual meeting spot for a financial advisor. This was a place for secrets, for things that needed to be hidden. I decided I needed to get eyes on that warehouse. On Saturday, when Mark and Mom were out for one of their increasingly frequent weekend getaways, usually to a quaint bed and breakfast a couple of hours away, I told my friend Sarah I was going to the library for an all-day study session. Instead, I borrowed my mom's old bicycle, a rusty mountain bike she hadn't touched in years, and set off. The sun was bright, the air warm, but I felt a pervasive chill. I wore a plain dark hoodie and sunglasses, hoping to blend in. The ride took almost an hour. The industrial park was a collection of gray, anonymous buildings, all looking identical under the harsh afternoon sun. Warehouse number 7A was at the very end of a gravel road, partially obscured by a stand of overgrown weeds. It looked deserted, its metal siding dull and scarred, a single broken window near the roofline. A faint metallic smell hung in the air, mixed with dust. There was an old, faded for lease sign leaning against the chain-link fence, but it looked years old, covered in moss. No cars were parked nearby, no signs of recent activity. I dismounted my bike, pretending to adjust something on the chain, while covertly scanning the area. As I was about to give up, my eyes caught something. Tucked away around the back, behind a stack of rusted barrels, was a small, inconspicuous security camera. It was old, one of those bulky, box-shaped models, and looked like it hadn't worked in years. But it was there. And if it was there, it suggested someone might have cared about security at some point. More importantly, it faced directly towards the main entrance of the warehouse, just visible over the barrels. A long shot, but maybe... I rode back, my legs aching, my mind racing. I needed to see if that camera had any footage. But how? I couldn't just walk in and ask. That night, after Mom and Mark returned, flushed and happy from their trip, I kept to my room, feigning a headache. I spent hours researching security cameras, especially older models. I found forums discussing common vulnerabilities, default passwords, and how they often connect to a central DVR system within the building. I even found a diagram for a similar model, showing where the internal hard drive would be. The following Tuesday, Mark called Mom from work, saying he needed to cancel dinner, as he had an unexpected emergency client meeting at the office, one that would probably run late. Mom seemed disappointed, but understanding. This was my chance. I knew he was usually out late on Tuesdays for Rotary Club meetings, but an emergency client meeting sounded like it could be a longer absence. I confirmed with Mom that he wouldn't be back before 10 p.m. I had a window. I needed to get into Mark's home office. He kept it locked when he wasn't there, a small, heavy-set oak door at the back of the house. He had installed a keypad lock on it, a Smart Lock 3000 model. I'd seen him enter the code once by accident when I walked past just as he was typing. It was his birth year, reversed, 8395. A surprisingly simple code for someone so secretive. He probably thought no one would ever notice. That night, after Mom had gone to bed, humming softly, I waited. At 11:15 p.m., I heard the faint click of the garage door opening, then closing. Mark's car. He was home. My heart sank. The opportunity was gone. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, frustrated. Then, about 10 minutes later, I heard it again. The garage door opening, then closing. What was he doing? Going out again? This was highly unusual. I crept to my window, peeking through a gap in the blinds. The Audi was backing out of the driveway, its taillights glowing red, then it sped off down the street. He'd forgotten something, or had another emergency. This was my window, a second chance. Even riskier now because he could return at any moment. I slipped out of my room, adrenaline coursing through me. The house was silent, save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. I tiptoed to Mark's office door. My fingers trembled as I typed in the code, 8395. The small green light flashed, and I heard a soft click. The door swung open. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of a street lamp through the window. It smelled of old paper and Mark's cologne. I flipped on the desk lamp, keeping it on a low setting. His office was meticulously organized. Stacks of files, labeled precisely, filled the shelves. A large, expensive-looking desktop computer sat on the oak desk. I knew I couldn't access that. It would have a password. I scanned the room, looking for anything that might link to the warehouse or to Project Chimera. I opened a drawer labeled Miscellaneous Contracts. Inside, nestled among other documents, I found a lease agreement. It was for warehouse number 7A. The tenant was listed as Viridian Solutions, LLC. The lease term was for 2 years, starting 2.5 years ago, a few months before Project Chimera was drafted. Mark's signature was at the bottom, alongside the property owner, a shell company registered in Delaware. The rent was paid in cash, noted in the ledger entries, every month. Cash, another red flag. My eyes darted around. On a small side table, next to a mini fridge, was a stack of blank Viridian Solutions business cards, identical to the one I'd found in his bag. And on top of the stack, a small black USB stick. It looked like an ordinary flash drive. I grabbed it, my heart pounding. This could be anything. Or nothing, but the proximity to the blank cards and the warehouse lease felt significant. I also noticed a small, folded piece of paper tucked under the desk blotter. It was a handwritten note in Mark's familiar script. Meeting 3:30 a.m., Quarry Ard, ensure clean sweep. No loose ends. No loose ends. The date on the note was March 9th, the day before Dad vanished. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Quarry Road, 3:30 a.m. Just minutes before Dad's phone went dead, and no loose ends. This was it. This was Mark's direct involvement. He wasn't just connected to Dad's disappearance. He was the orchestrator. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the USB. I quickly snapped photos of the lease agreement, of the handwritten note, and of the blank business cards with the USB stick next to them. Then I pocketed the USB stick, slipped out of the office, carefully locked the door behind me, and retreated to my room, my mind a storm of terror and revelation. I plugged the USB into my laptop. It contained only one folder, labeled Archive. Inside, there were dozens of video files, all time-stamped. I clicked on the first one. It was a feed from the security camera at warehouse number 7A. The exact one I'd seen. The date on the first video was 2 years and 2 months ago. I scrolled rapidly through the files, searching for March 10th. I found it. The video from 3:00 a.m. on March 10th. My fingers hovered over the play button, dread churning in my stomach. What would I see? My father? Something terrible? The silence in my room felt suffocating. I pressed play. The video started with grainy black and white footage, a wide shot of the warehouse entrance, illuminated by the faint glow of the distant streetlights. The timestamp, clearly visible in the top left corner, read 2023 3/10/03/2. My breath hitched in my throat. This was it. This was the moment. The silence of my room was broken only by the whirring of my laptop fan. My eyes were glued to the screen, tracing every shadow, every movement. At 3:08 a.m., a dark sedan, a model I recognized as Mark's Audi A6, pulled up to the warehouse entrance. Its headlights cut through the pre-dawn gloom, momentarily blinding the camera. Then it parked just out of frame. The driver's side door opened. A figure emerged, tall and broad-shouldered. Mark. There was no mistaking his gait, even in the poor lighting. He was wearing a dark jacket, and I could faintly make out the glint of his silver watch as he checked his wrist. He looked around, then motioned towards the passenger side. Another figure emerged from the car, shorter, slightly built. It was Dad. My breath hitched. He looked disheveled, his movements slower than usual, almost as if he'd been dragged there. His head was bowed. Mark spoke to him, but the video had no audio, just the silent, horrifying pantomime. Mark seemed to be arguing, gesturing emphatically towards the warehouse door. Dad shook his head, looking distressed. He tried to turn away, but Mark grabbed his arm, pulling him forcefully towards the building. Dad stumbled, but Mark kept a tight grip. They disappeared inside the warehouse at 3:11 a.m. The camera showed only the closed metal door, then the empty parking lot, bathed in the eerie, silent watch of the dawn. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Dad was alive then. He was with Mark. But what happened inside? I fast-forwarded the footage, minute by agonizing minute. 3:34 a.m. Mark emerged from the warehouse, alone. He looked calm, almost too calm. He went to the trunk of his Audi, opened it, and pulled out a large, dark tarp. He then went back inside the warehouse. 5 minutes later, at 3:39 a.m., he reappeared, pushing something on a small wheeled dolly. It was covered by the tarp, but the shape underneath, it was long, roughly human-sized. My stomach lurched. No, it couldn't be. Mark struggled slightly, pushing the dolly towards the trunk of his car. He carefully, meticulously, loaded the tarp-covered shape into the trunk. He then closed the trunk, wiped something from the bumper with a cloth he pulled from his pocket, and got back into the driver's seat. He sat there for a full minute, looking at his watch, before slowly backing out and driving away. The timestamp on the video read 3:47 a.m. The exact time Dad's old flip phone made its last call. The exact time Mark would have been leaving the vicinity of the quarry road. I sat there, frozen, the silent horror of the video replaying in my mind. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This was irrefutable proof. Mark had taken Dad to that warehouse, and Dad never came out. The no loose ends note, the resolved entry in Mark's journal, the lease agreement for that very warehouse, the timing of Dad's last phone activity, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Mark, Mom's charming, supportive boyfriend, was a murderer, and he was living in our house. Panic, cold and suffocating, seized me. What was I supposed to do? Go to the police? I had the video, the notes, the cards. But Mark was powerful, connected. He'd probably have an alibi, or enough influence to twist things. They might not believe a 16-year-old girl with a blurry phone picture and a video from a disused warehouse camera. They might even dismiss it as a revenge fantasy from a grieving daughter. I was alone, truly alone, with this horrifying truth. I tried to calm myself, taking deep, shaky breaths. Think, Clara, think. My mind raced. I needed an ally, someone strong, someone who could help me navigate this. My Aunt Sarah, Dad's sister, lived 2 states away. She was a lawyer, sharp and fiercely loyal to her family. But how could I explain this over the phone without sounding completely unhinged? And what if Mark intercepted my communications? He always seemed to know everything. The way he monitored the house, the way he watched me. I felt like a mouse trapped in a house with a cat. The school's guidance counselor, Ms. Albright, was another option. She was kind, always seemed to genuinely listen. But she was part of the system, and Mark was part of that system too, a well-respected figure in the community. Would she go straight to my mom, who was clearly under Mark's spell? Or worse, would she inadvertently tip off Mark? The stakes were too high to make a mistake. I looked at the video again. The quality wasn't perfect. But it was clear enough to identify Mark, and clear enough to identify the general shape of what he was moving. This was enough for a proper investigation, if it got into the right hands. The digital timestamp was crucial. This wasn't something I could hold on to. I had to get it out. My plan began to form, a desperate, risky gambit. I couldn't just hand it over. I needed to ensure it went directly to someone who would act, and who could protect me. And I had to do it without Mark knowing I had anything. This meant being utterly invisible. My phone was too risky. My laptop could be compromised. I needed a secure way to send the evidence. I remembered Dad's old PGP encryption software on his external hard drive. He used it for ultra-secure client communications, something he'd joked about as tinfoil hat tech. I found it, a small application called CryptoLock, version 2.7. It was complex, requiring a key pair and specific configurations. But I remembered him showing me how to use it once, years ago, when I was fascinated by secret codes. He'd said, "Never trust an open line, Clara. Always encrypt." I had a faint memory of where he kept his private keys. Under the false bottom of his old chessboard, a beautiful wooden set carved by hand, I found a small laminated card. It contained a series of random letters and numbers, his encryption passphrase. He'd told me to memorize it, just in case you ever need to decipher a treasure map, kiddo. Now it was less about treasure and more about justice. My hands shook as I typed the passphrase into the CryptoLock software, generating his old public and private key. This was it. I was going to send an encrypted package of evidence to Aunt Sarah. She was my only hope. The encrypted package was ready, a meticulously compiled archive containing the video footage from the USB drive, the photos of Mark's journal entry, resolved March 10th, the warehouse lease, and the handwritten note about no loose ends. I had even included the picture of Dad from the charity gala, proving their prior connection. The file was massive, over 2 gigabytes, but the encryption wrapped it in an uncrackable digital shell, known only to Dad's private key and Aunt Sarah's public key, which I managed to find on her professional website for her law firm, Sterling and Associates, under Secure Communications. The timestamp on the encrypted file, before I sent it, was exactly 02:17 a.m. My next problem was sending it. Sending such a large file from my home network was too risky. Mark, being a tech-savvy manager, had installed network monitoring software on our router, ostensibly for parental control, but I suspected it was more to keep tabs on everything. I needed an anonymous connection. My mind went to the school library. They had high-speed internet, and with hundreds of students, my connection would be lost in the noise. The following morning, I woke up with a steely resolve. I left for school an hour early, telling Mom I had an important study group. She was still half asleep, sipping her coffee, barely registering my words. Mark was already gone, his Audi absent from the driveway, which was a small relief. I clutched my backpack, feeling the weight of the USB drive and Dad's hard drive inside. At the library, which opened at 7 a.m., I went straight to the furthest computer, tucked away in a quiet corner. I plugged in Dad's old hard drive, which contained the encrypted package. Then, using a fresh email address I'd created specifically for this, one with no personal identifiers, I composed an email to Aunt Sarah. The subject line was cryptic: estate matter, Thomas Miller, a phrase Dad sometimes used when discussing legal documents. The body of the email simply stated, Aunt Sarah, attached, please find urgent documents pertaining to Uncle Tom. Please treat with extreme discretion and confidentiality. Clara, I attached the encrypted file. The library's internet was fast, but it still took a full 20 minutes for the massive file to upload and send. Each percentage point felt like an eternity. When it finally sent, a wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a fresh surge of terror. The evidence was out. But now, I had to wait, and waiting meant being exposed. I quickly cleared the browser history, deleted the email from the sent folder, and ejected the drive. I walked to my first class, history, my hands still slightly trembling, but a flicker of hope had ignited within me. Aunt Sarah called me that afternoon during lunch. My phone buzzed, displaying an unknown number. I excused myself from the cafeteria, walking out into the empty hallway. Clara, it's Aunt Sarah, are you okay? Her voice was tight, urgent. I just received your email. What is this? This Project Chimera and Mark Davies? Her voice was barely a whisper. Did you open the encrypted file? I asked, my voice barely audible. Yes, she confirmed. Your father's old key still worked. Clara, this is incredibly serious. Are you safe? Is Mark there? He's at work, I whispered. And Mom is with him. I'm at school. I need help, Aunt Sarah. I'm scared. Don't worry, honey. I'm calling Detective Hayes directly. I know his superior, Captain Rodriguez, from a pro bono case years ago. This isn't a local police matter anymore. This is state level, potentially federal. You stay at school, do not go home. Do you understand? I'm booking a flight now. I'll be there tonight. She sounded resolute, her lawyer brain already in high gear. I'll arrange for you to stay with a family friend here in town until I arrive. Someone Mark doesn't know, someone trustworthy. I'll text you their address and a code word. Pack a small bag with essentials, but nothing that would raise suspicion. The plan was set. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Aunt Sarah was taking over. I wasn't alone anymore. But the hours until she arrived stretched ahead of me like an endless, terrifying gauntlet. I spent the rest of the school day in a haze. I texted my mom, telling her I was staying after school for a group project and would be home late. A small lie, but a necessary one. At 3:15 p.m., the school bell rang, signaling the end of the day. I walked out, not towards the bus stop, but towards Mrs. Henderson's house. A sweet, elderly English teacher who lived a few blocks from school and sometimes tutored me in literature. Aunt Sarah's text had come through. Mrs. Henderson. Code, Red Robin. Mrs. Henderson was a widow, living alone, and had no connection to Mark. A perfect sanctuary. As I walked, I saw Mark's dark gray Audi, license plate Very 27, idling slowly down the street, about a block behind me. My heart leaped into my throat. He was usually at work at this time. He was looking for me. My blood ran cold. He knew. Or he suspected. I quickened my pace, trying to act natural, my palms sweating. I turned the corner, making a beeline for Mrs. Henderson's house, praying he wouldn't see me enter. I knocked rapidly on her door, my breath catching in my chest. Mrs. Henderson opened it, her kind face crinkling in a smile. Clara, dear, come in. I stumbled inside, breathless. Red Robin, I gasped. Her eyes widened, instantly understanding the urgency. Come, dear, quickly. She ushered me into her living room, drawing the curtains. Aunt Sarah called. She said you might need a safe place. She's on her way. Minutes later, I heard a car slow down outside, its engine idling. My heart hammered. Was it Mark, Mrs. Henderson peered through a small gap in the curtains. It's him, she whispered, her voice tight. He's driving slowly, looking at the houses. My stomach dropped. He had found me, or at least he knew I was nearby. The net was closing. I could feel his eyes, even through the walls, searching. The silence of the room was punctuated only by the distant chirping of crickets and the slow, ominous rumble of Mark's car as it passed the house, then turned around, slowly circling the block again. He was hunting me. The rumble of Mark's Audi circled Mrs. Henderson's quiet street a second time, then a third. Each pass was a tightening of the knot in my stomach. Mrs. Henderson, a woman who usually spent her afternoons tending her rose garden and grading essays, was now a silent, vigilant sentinel by the window, her expression grim. He's still out there, Clara, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The clock on her mantelpiece, an antique with a soft chime, read 4:35 p.m. Aunt Sarah's flight wasn't due to land until 7 p.m. I felt like a hunted animal, trapped in a cage made of time. He knows, I finally managed to say, my voice hoarse. He must suspect something. How else would he be here? Mrs. Henderson turned from the window, her gaze firm. Perhaps he just knows you're not where you said you'd be. Or maybe he saw you talking to Mr. Peterson the other day. But whatever it is, we need to stay calm. Aunt Sarah assured me help is coming. Suddenly, the phone rang, a shrill, jarring sound in the quiet house. Mrs. Henderson glanced at the caller ID. It's your mother? She looked at me, a silent question in her eyes. I nodded. We couldn't raise suspicion. Mrs. Henderson picked up, her voice a little shaky, but remarkably composed. Hello, Sandra. Yes, Clara is here. She came over to borrow a book for her English project. She just finished. Oh, she did text you she'd be late. She's just heading home now, Mrs. A. Henderson gave me a pointed look, mouthing, Go to your room. I understood. As Mrs. Henderson continued her conversation, trying to deflect Mom's questions, I slipped out of the living room and into the spare bedroom Mrs. Henderson had prepared for me. It was a cozy room, filled with old family photos and a faint scent of lavender. I locked the door and pulled out my phone. I had to warn Aunt Sarah. I quickly typed a message. He's here, circling. He knows I'm not home. Might try to get in. Be careful. I didn't hit send. What if my phone was being tracked? What if Mark was listening? I tucked the phone away, the fear making my blood run cold. Mrs. Henderson walked past the room, her voice still calm as she spoke to Mom. Yes, she's a wonderful student, always so focused. I'll make sure she's on her way. Then, a moment later, I heard her footsteps retreat and the soft click of her front door closing. She was pretending I was leaving. A decoy. My heart pounded. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then, a sharp, insistent knock on the front door, not Mrs. Henderson's gentle lion knocker. This was a series of hard, deliberate raps. Mark. My breath caught in my throat. Mrs. Henderson must have told Mom I was leaving, and Mom had likely told Mark. He wasn't fooled. I heard Mrs. Henderson's voice, firm and clear. May I help you? Mrs. Henderson, it's Mark Davies. I believe Clara is here. Sandra said she was just leaving. Mark's voice, usually booming, was now dangerously smooth, almost silken. She just walked out, Mr. Davies, a few minutes ago. I assumed she was going home. Mrs. Henderson was a good actress. A short pause. I see. Well, my apologies, but I haven't seen her. Perhaps she stopped somewhere on the way. May I just take a quick look, just to be sure? Sandra is quite worried, you understand. His voice was dripping with false concern. Mr. Davies, I appreciate your concern, but I don't entertain visitors unannounced, especially when they're looking for someone who isn't here. Her voice was unwavering. Now, if you'll excuse me. I heard the unmistakable sound of Mark trying the doorknob. It rattled faintly. Mrs. Henderson, I must insist. My partner's daughter is missing, and I have every right to ensure her safety. His voice was harder now, the silky pretense gone. You have no right to enter my home without an invitation or a warrant, Mr. Davies. I suggest you leave. Now? There was a steel in her voice I hadn't heard before. A moment of tense silence. Then a low growl from Mark. This isn't over. I heard heavy footsteps retreating, then the familiar thrum of his Audi's engine starting, driving away. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Mrs. Henderson was amazing. She came to the spare room, her face pale but her eyes still determined. He's gone for now. But he knows you're here, Clara. Or at least he knows I'm lying. She sat down on the edge of the bed. We need to barricade the doors. Just in case. We found 2 heavy antique armoires and pushed them against the front and back doors, blocking them securely. We checked all the windows, locking them, making sure the blinds were drawn tight. The house felt like a fortress, but a very fragile one. Hours crawled by. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside sent a jolt of fear through me. Mrs. Henderson made us tea, a calming mint blend, but my hands were too shaky to hold the cup steady. My phone finally buzzed again. It was Aunt Sarah. Landed, on my way, ETA 45 minutes. Captain Rodriguez alerted. Police en route. Do not engage. Relief, powerful and overwhelming, flooded me. Help was coming. Around 6:50 p.m., just as dusk was settling, we heard a different sound. Not Mark's Audi. This was the distinctive wail of sirens, growing closer. First 1, then 2, then 3. The flashing blue and red lights painted the windows with an urgent, pulsating glow. I rushed to the window, peering out. 2 police cruisers were pulling up to Mrs. Henderson's house, followed by an unmarked black sedan. And then Aunt Sarah's rental car, a compact silver sedan, pulled up right behind them. She jumped out, her face etched with concern, quickly speaking to the uniformed officers. A moment later, Aunt Sarah was at the door, knocking. It's me, Clara. It's Aunt Sarah, Mrs. Sees. Henderson and I quickly moved the armoires. The moment the door opened, I ran into Aunt Sarah's arms, clutching her tightly. Oh, Clara, my brave girl, she murmured, stroking my hair. Her eyes were teary, but filled with a fierce determination. Behind her, Captain Rodriguez, a tall, imposing woman with a no-nonsense expression, stepped forward. Clara, my name is Captain Rodriguez. Your aunt has told us everything. We believe your evidence is substantial. We're going to get you somewhere safe. Mark Davies has been placed under surveillance. We're preparing to execute a search warrant for the warehouse and for his home. Her voice was calm, reassuring, but the gravity of the situation was palpable. I nodded, unable to speak. Aunt Sarah put her arm around my shoulders. She needs a debriefing, Captain, but she's been through a lot. Can we do it at a secure location? Of course, Attorney Miller, Captain Rodriguez replied, using Aunt Sarah's professional title. We'll take her to the precinct, a secure interview room. There's a detective waiting for her. And then she'll be in protective custody with you. That night felt like a blur. I sat in a brightly lit interview room at the police precinct, recounting everything to Detective Jones, a kind-faced woman who listened patiently, taking meticulous notes. I showed her the video footage from the USB drive, the photos of Mark's journal, the lease agreement, Dad's last phone call. Each piece of evidence fell into place, building an undeniable case against Mark Davies. The video of him loading the tarp-covered object into his trunk, time-stamped to the minute, was the final, horrifying nail in his coffin. Around midnight, Captain Rodriguez came into the room. Her face was grim. "Clara," she said, her voice softer than before. "We found something at Warehouse 7A, a shallow grave under a newly poured concrete slab in a back corner. The forensic team is there now. We believe it's your father." A cold, hollow ache settled in my chest. I had known deep down, but hearing it confirmed from an official was a different kind of pain. Dad was gone. Mark had murdered him. But a small, defiant part of me felt a fierce sense of vindication. I had found him. I had found the truth. The next few days were a whirlwind. Mark Davies was arrested early that morning at his home without incident. They found the moleskin journal in his office, confirming my story. The Viridian Solutions LLC business card with Dad's name on it, along with a stack of others, was also seized. He denied everything, claiming Dad had run off with client funds and that he was merely covering for him. But the video, the journal, the concrete slab, and the subsequent discovery of Dad's remains told a very different, far more gruesome story. The Project Chimera documents, particularly the discreet cessation clause and no loose ends note, painted a clear motive. Dad had wanted out of the illegal scheme, and Mark silenced him. Mom was devastated, utterly broken. When the police told her, she collapsed. The man she had let into our lives, the man she loved, had murdered her husband. The betrayal was complete. She had no idea about Project Chimera, or Mark's true nature. She was another victim, ensnared by his charm and deceit. Aunt Sarah took over everything. She arranged for Dad's official identification, the funeral, and handled all legal matters. Mark was formally charged with first-degree murder and multiple counts of financial fraud and racketeering. His high-profile status in the community evaporated overnight. His pillar of the community image shattered, replaced by a cold, calculating killer. It's been 7 weeks since Mark's arrest and Dad's funeral. I'm living with Aunt Sarah now, in her quiet, organized apartment 1,000 miles away. The court proceedings are ongoing, but the evidence against Mark is overwhelming. He pleaded not guilty, of course, but his lawyer is already looking for a plea deal, acknowledging the mountain of evidence. My testimony, backed by the video and documents, will be central to the prosecution's case. Mom is in therapy, trying to piece her life back together. She calls me almost every day, her voice still fragile. We talk about Dad, about happier memories, about how we'll get through this together. She's starting to see how Mark manipulated her, how he isolated her from anyone who might have seen through his facade. She even acknowledged that she was too quick to move on, that her grief made her vulnerable. It's not an easy conversation, but we're having them. I'm attending a new school here, a smaller one with friendly faces. It's different, but peaceful. I still miss Dad every single day. The ache is constant, but it's no longer mixed with the terrifying uncertainty. I know what happened. I know the truth. And I know I brought it to light. I learned that sometimes the most dangerous people wear the most charming masks. I learned to trust my instincts, even when everyone else tells you you're wrong. That gut feeling, that persistent unease, was my most valuable guide. I also learned that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about acting despite the fear, especially when the stakes are higher than anything you've ever known, and that even a 16-year-old kid can bring down a powerful, corrupt man. The memory of Dad is no longer shadowed by his disappearance, but by the fierce love of a daughter who would stop at nothing to uncover the truth.